I have practiced family law since 1992. I think that's 33 years. And most of that time, because I am at heart, I'm really an actress. I love the courtroom. It is so much fun for me to go in and put on a show. But that show costs a lot of money. And when you have children, that show and what gets said during that show by you, by your spouse, by other witnesses, relatives, whoever, can completely destroy any hope of a good co-parenting relationship going forward. And even if you don't have children, it can influence how you feel about marriage, how you feel about ever getting married again, what you think of your family, what you think of your friends. There are so many horrible, horrible things that can happen when you go in that courtroom. I mean, being in the courtroom is one thing. It's not a pleasant experience for the parties. It's a great experience for me because I love it, but I've been there lots. I've been in the courtroom probably thousands of times. But there comes a point in everybody's life when they have to decide what is most important to me. What do I need most? I decided about 12 or 13 years ago, what I needed most was to stop litigating divorce cases and custody modifications, because I finally understood what lawyers had been telling me for a very long time. Lawyers on the other side of cases, and just lawyers that I knew, would tell me, you take your cases awfully personally. And I always thought, I don't know what you mean by that. I mean, I've got a client and I'm just doing the best job I can for my client. But in about 2011, 2012, I finally understood what they were trying to say. Because one of the reasons people would come to me was because I was a real fighter. And I was. If I believed in what I was fighting for, I would go into that courtroom and I would fight like it was my own case, like it was me. Clients loved that, absolutely loved that, because they felt like I really was speaking for them. But it was killing me. It's one thing to go through your divorce, have it be horrible, and then it's over, and you can heal from that. But what if you had that divorce every day of the week? Every weekday you were in a courtroom fighting about whatever it is there is to fight about. And if you're the lawyer and you take things as personally as I apparently did, eventually you just can't do it anymore. And I reached that point. It was about 2012 when I made the decision that I was going to find a better way to practice law, a better way to use what I'd learned, because I'd learned so much. I've tried thousands of cases in those 33 years. And I've learned a lot about what matters to people, what's worth fighting about, what the children need or don't need. Probably children and the effect of divorce on children is my primary motivator, but it is not my only motivator. I care about people. That's why I would go in and fight so hard, because I care. And there's nothing wrong with caring, but there's a better way to care and help people through the process than going in and fighting in a courtroom, and that's mediation. Now, what used to happen is that you would hire lawyers and you'd do a little fighting, and then you'd get in front of the judge, and the judge would order you to mediation. And they still have a way to do that, even though the law changed a little bit where they can't order you to mediation, but they can make you want to go by doing all kinds of things that limit your lawyer's ability to represent you in a good way. So regardless of the reason, regardless of the rules, you're going to end up in mediation one way or the other. And most cases settle in mediation. But by the time you get there, if you've hired lawyers, you have already spent thousands of dollars. And one day of mediation in today's world can cost anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000 for the two of you, just for that one day. By the time you pay your lawyers, two lawyers, and you pay your mediator, each of you paying half of what the mediator charges, you've spent an incredible amount of money, as much money or more than it would cost you to go in and try the case. Some lawyers will even say, oh, don't waste your time on mediation. we can try this case easier than we can mediate. It'd be cheaper to go to trial. Well, that may be true. I don't know because I don't know your case. But even if it is true, there's much more cost to going in that courtroom than there is money. There's the cost of time. There's the cost of energy. There's the cost of feelings. There's the cost of hurt that you never get over because of the things that get said about you from that witness stand or the things that you have to say in order to get what you want. All in all, family law does not belong in the courtroom. And no matter how hard you try to keep your children out of it, even your adult children, they know. They know when mom and dad are at odds. They know when things aren't right, and they are affected by it. Even if you never say anything bad about their other parent, the children know. So, in about that time frame, about 2012, what I decided was that I was going to help people through the divorce process, mediating cases before they hire lawyers, so that the mediation cost at least about a third of what it would cost to go to mediation with lawyers. And there aren't a lot of lawyers that will mediate for clients who aren't represented by attorneys. I think that's because they're concerned about their license or that they'll say something that's the wrong thing, because mediators, even if they're lawyers, can't give you legal advice. But in family law, there's not a lot of legal advice. Most of it is about what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your spouse, what makes sense for your children. It isn't about what you want to win. It's how do we get through this in a way that everybody's still sane, not angry, not have feelings that will stay with them through the rest of their lives, not affect their children in a way that their children can never have a normal relationship with one parent or the other, and perhaps both parents. I do these mediations now, and frequently the couple I'm mediating with are the children of divorce. And they've come to mediation because they do not want to put their children through what they went through when their parents were divorcing. And I support that 100%. Based on my own experience. I've been divorced, so I've got that experience, even though it was a fairly friendly divorce, all things considered. And my children were all grown and had children of their own, but it still affected them. I thought, well, they're grown. They've got kids. They've got their own lives. What do they care? They know their dad and I don't get along. Was I ever wrong? It definitely affected them, and my children are very outspoken, and they let me know. Your children may be equally outspoken, but regardless, just know that your children are affected, regardless of their age. Of course, if a child is younger and is living with you, they see more, they know more. But the best thing that you can do, if what you're really wanting to do is to preserve some kind of friendly relationship with your soon-to-be ex-spouse, and to have your children be touched or influenced as little as possible about what you're going through, is to go to mediation before you ever hire a lawyer. My company is Divorce Mediation Centers, and the focus of Divorce Mediation Centers is to help you through whatever family law issue you have without attorneys in a way that makes sense in your life and the lives of the people you love. And that's what we think about the whole time. And when the two of you aren't agreeing on something, that's what we remind you. Is this what you want for your family? Is this what you want for your children? Here's an example. And I'm going to use some generalities, so please forgive me if I'm using a generality that doesn't apply to you. But still, even in what are we in, the 21st century? Whatever century we're in. I'm sorry, I'm not real good about centuries. But in the 2020s, I'll say that, men still typically make more money than women do. So usually you're looking at a situation that the dad or the husband is going to be paying child support or at least contributing to help out with the children, even if they're adults and they're in college or thinking about all of those things. And let's say the husband, let's say you're going to share the children 50-50, because I get this a lot in mediation. We're going to share the children 50-50. Now, I can talk about that in a little while, but if you're going to share the children 50-50, then the person who makes more money is thinking, well, I'm going to spend as much on the kids as you are, so I shouldn't have to pay child support because I have to provide a house, I have to provide transportation, I have to provide their food when they're with me. All of that is true, and I understand that logic. But then we start talking about, well, what if this? What if the child is turned 16 and you want to buy a car? Or what if the child is a piano, plays the piano and is very good and needs special lessons? Or maybe your child is very athletic and there's a lot of money to be spent on athletics. A lot of times the dad will say, oh, I'll make sure that my children get whatever they need. And I'm sure that dad is very sincere and means exactly what he's saying. But think about how that affects the children. And that's what I do. When I hear that, my next thing to say usually is, well, let's talk about how that will affect your children. And once we have that conversation and mom and dad realize that, well, if the kids think that dad's the one that's going to pay for all these things, and dad's the one I need to play up to, and dad's the one I need to treat nice, and I can't get mad at dad because then he won't do those things. And then what you're doing, and I hate to say this, and maybe it's not true in all cases, but what happens is your children then become much more manipulative than they already are. And let's agree that children are naturally manipulative, naturally narcissistic. They care about how everything affects them. And they learn at a very young age, even when you're together, which parent is going to give them what. But because you are sharing the money, it's easier. When you're divorced and you're not sharing the money, it's harder. So I encourage parents to think about how we're going to pay for all of these things, how we're going to make sure that our children's needs are met without encouraging that kind of manipulation on their part and encouraging them to take sides. A lot of people think when they're getting divorced that they're breaking up a family. If you have children, even adult children, you are not breaking up a family. You are forming a different kind of family. Those relationships all continue to matter. Dad is still dad. Mom is still mom. And that relationship between mom and dad, even after divorce, is the most important relationship to the children, even the adult children. Don't let yourself be convinced that your adult children don't care or have it all figured out, because they haven't been around you together probably for a long time. And they may have forgotten some of the things that happened when they were children that made them take sides between you. So they will be devastated if you are getting divorced in a way that makes them feel they need to take sides. So that's one of the beautiful things about mediation. We get to talk about these things. We get to have conversation. We get to explore the pros and the cons and look at all the options. You don't get to do that when you're with a judge. A judge doesn't give you that kind of time. And even in a mediation with lawyers, and I've been a lawyer in those mediations hundreds, if not thousands of times, and I can tell you that mediating with lawyers, and I'm not trying to be critical of lawyers. They're just trying to do their job. And I've done that job. I know what that job is. I just have learned what doing that job can do to people. And even though it may be the right thing to do as a lawyer, if you kind of rise above that outlook and look at how can I help this couple in the best possible way, then your lawyering needs to take second place to that. And if a lawyer does that, they can get in trouble for other reasons. So I understand why lawyers are the way they are. That's why going to a mediator who isn't going to take sides. And in my mediations, if I take any sides, it's the side of the children. When I hear you talking about you or your spouse or whoever talking about, what you think you ought to do, I'm going to ask, how does the children play into that? How does that affect the children? And again, I do that whether you have adult children or not, or minor children. And I would say easily 99% of the time, just making that suggestion, just getting the parents to think in that way brings us to a settlement, brings us to a conclusion that they both are willing to do. Now, I want to say something else about trying to reach agreements in family law cases, because people, even when they don't have lawyers, they've probably, before they've even contemplated divorce, they've probably, they're in their corners and they've got their positions. So one role of a mediator, in my opinion, is to get those positions out on the table and talk about them and talk about why they're there. And I know that I am not a therapist. I haven't been trained as a therapist, but I have to tell you that in mediations, I sometimes think I am being a therapist. But what I'm really being is somebody that's looking at the overall picture. I haven't taken sides. I haven't lived it, but I've seen what the consequences are when people go through that. So I can share that with them. And I share war stories all the time about, what I've seen happen, the good and the bad. Because my goal when I'm mediating with you and any of our Divorce Mediation Center mediators is to have you walk out of that office relieved that you've reached all of these agreements and that those agreements are workable for you and workable for your family. One of my mottos is happy parents make happy children. So while lawyers and judges and family law are thinking, well, we have to do what's in the best interest of the children. So we're always just looking, what does a child need? Well, the child may not be best served by mom moving far away from dad. But maybe mom's got a really good job and mom can make really good money by moving a little bit further away. And so we've got to balance that with, what is the difference in how much money? Is it really going to make a difference in the children's lives? Is there a way to come up with a parenting plan that works for everybody? Maybe dad has an influence that could help mom find a better job locally. Or maybe dad's movable. Maybe he can work online, and so it doesn't matter where he lives. Maybe there's something we can do that makes it possible for everybody to have a better result. Sometimes it's not possible, but at least we spent some time exploring all of that so that when you walk away, whatever agreement you've reached, you've had your opportunity to have your say, and you've had your opportunity to think through and talk through all the possibilities and all the ramifications and make the best decision you can under the circumstances. And you will never get that opportunity if you're in the middle of litigation. I assure you of that. Even when you're in mediation with lawyers, you won't get that opportunity because you won't even be able to talk to your spouse. They keep you separated the whole day. You don't get to sit down and explore those options. But with divorce mediation centers, you do get that opportunity.